When you're driving across the United States, not every threat comes with a warning sign. You're rolling along a quiet two-lane road. The sky is fading into dusk, and suddenly your fuel light blinks on. Up ahead, a small town appears calm at first glance. Neat porches, an empty main street, maybe even an old courthouse in the center. But in towns like these, quiet doesn't always mean safe. Sometimes, it means something else entirely. We usually imagine danger as something obvious and noisy. The flashing lights of Chicago, the crime reports out of Detroit. Yet some of the darkest stories come from places most people couldn't point to on a map. Small communities scarred by economic hardship and cycles of trauma, where even pulling over for gas can feel like a decision you have to think twice about. From the decaying steel remains of Bessemer to the creative yet complicated corners of Taos, we're counting down 10 towns where keep driving isn't paranoia. It's common sense. And by the time we reveal number 1, you may start to wonder if a town's peaceful name can be the most misleading thing about it. The warning hidden in its name. Bogalusa rests among the pine woods of southeastern Louisiana, less than an hour from the Mississippi border. Its name comes from the Choctaw language, meaning dark water, and the description feels almost symbolic. Beneath the calm scenery and southern charm lies a community shaped by long-term economic decline. The town began as a classic company town, built around a massive paper mill that once provided jobs for the majority of residents. For decades, that mill powered daily life and kept the local economy stable. But when operations were reduced and the plant stopped serving as the town's main financial backbone, the stability collapsed with it. What followed wasn't revitalization, but years of lingering hardship. Today, Bogalusa faces a poverty rate hovering around 31%, with per capita income just over $20,000. Reports show violent crime rates exceeding 1,100 incidents per 100,000 residents, placing it far above the national average. Among some locals, it has picked up a grim nickname, Bogalusa. Residents rarely call the town chaotic. Instead, they describe an atmosphere of tension. Many gas stations shut their doors early. Some operate behind thick security bars and reinforced windows, while others stand abandoned altogether. After sunset, large sections of the town fall into darkness, not because of official restrictions, but because there is little business left to justify staying open. In Bogalusa, danger doesn't usually make noise. It lingers quietly in the absence of opportunity, in the jobs that never returned, and in the feeling that what once sustained the town has slowly faded away. When authority becomes the danger. Tulia rests on the wide, windswept plains of the Texas Panhandle, surrounded by farmland and endless horizon. It is small, remote, and easy to overlook if you are only driving through. Yet Tulia drew national attention for reasons that had nothing to do with rising crime statistics or economic decline. In 1999, nearly 1/10 of the town's population was arrested during a single drug operation. The accusations were serious, and the prison sentences were lengthy. Almost all of those charged were black residents in a town that was predominantly white. The entire case depended on the word of one undercover officer. There were no audio recordings, no video footage, and no physical evidence presented to support the claims. For years, the convictions remained in place. Families were separated. People lost their employment, their homes, and significant portions of their lives behind bars. Eventually, the case began to fall apart. The officer's credibility was challenged, the convictions were overturned, and the state of Texas later granted pardons to those affected. By that point, however, the consequences could not simply be undone. Today, Tulia feels quiet in a way that is difficult to describe. The silence is not tied to waves of violence or visible unrest. Instead, it reflects a community where trust was deeply shaken and never fully restored. Travelers are not cautioned about shootouts or street crime here. The story that lingers is about something more institutional. Gas stations and storefronts may not appear threatening, but there is a lingering sense of scrutiny. In places like Tulia, the fear is less about what might happen in the open and more about what can happen when the very system designed to protect citizens turns against them. Number 8. Stillwell. Trouble beneath the strawberries. Stillwell proudly promotes itself as the strawberry capital of the world. With a population of fewer than 4,000 residents, it presents the image of a postcard-worthy American small town, complete with annual festivals and fruit-themed celebrations. On the surface, it feels wholesome and welcoming. But beyond the cheerful branding, the statistics tell a far more complicated story. In 2023, reports showed the town's violent crime rate reaching more than 5 times the national average, with roughly 1,400 incidents per 100,000 residents. At the same time, poverty levels climbed above 40%. When economic hardship lingers for generations and community resources thin out, public safety often begins to erode. In places like this, social strain can grow faster than any harvest. Stillwell is located in Adair County, one of the most economically challenged areas in the state. The region carries a long history of limited investment and unmet promises. Local law enforcement agencies frequently operate with restricted funding, facing ongoing challenges tied to drug trafficking routes and cycles of criminal activity that span generations. If you pass through on a bright summer afternoon, you might see quiet porches, American flags fluttering, and dogs resting lazily in the shade. Everything appears peaceful at first glance. Yet conversations among residents online often paint a more cautious picture, advising travelers not to linger longer than necessary. Stillwell embodies a distinctly American contradiction. The welcoming facade of small-town charm stands in sharp contrast to the deeper struggles unfolding out of sight, where unresolved problems continue to shape daily life behind the scenes. Number 7. Hamtramck, a city under constant pressure. Hamtramck is an independent city entirely surrounded by Detroit. Though it covers just about 2 square miles, it is one of Michigan's most densely populated communities. Roughly 28,000 residents live within its tight borders, creating one of the highest population densities in the state. That density shapes everything. When financial strain, limited job opportunities, and cultural differences are concentrated into such a compact area, stress rarely fades quietly. Instead, it builds. Pressures overlap, and everyday life can feel amplified. Statistically, Hamtramck's overall crime rate sits close to the national average. However, its violent crime figures trend higher, with robberies and aggravated assaults contributing significantly to those numbers. The challenges are not uniform across every block, but certain areas carry a heavier burden than others. Historically, Hamtramck grew alongside the auto industry. Generations of immigrant workers built routines around factory schedules, neighborhood taverns, and tightly connected streets. When the automotive sector declined and factories closed or scaled back, the city did not vanish. It adapted. Today, Hamtramck stands as one of the most culturally diverse cities in the United States, home to large Muslim and immigrant communities from South Asia, the Middle East, and Eastern Europe. That wave of change revitalized local businesses and stabilized the economy. At the same time, rapid transformation introduced new social adjustments and occasional tensions common in fast-evolving communities. Living here often means developing strong situational awareness. Residents quickly learn which blocks feel energetic and welcoming, and which ones feel more uncertain after dark. It's a place where you might find exceptional late-night cuisine, yet still think carefully about where you choose to stop. Affordable rent can be appealing, but between property crime, crowded streets, and the steady intensity of life in such a compact environment, many people weigh the trade-off carefully, asking whether lower costs fully balance the daily pressure. Number 6. Pine Bluff. Scenic on the surface, scarred underneath. Pine Bluff rests along the Arkansas River, southeast of Little Rock. It was once considered one of the state's key industrial centers. Timber operations, agriculture, and manufacturing plants formed the backbone of the local economy, providing steady employment and shaping daily life for decades. For a time, those industries kept the city stable and growing. When those economic pillars weakened, the decline was not gradual. It was abrupt. The population dropped noticeably as jobs vanished faster than replacement opportunities could emerge. Entire neighborhoods felt the impact, with vacant properties and reduced investment becoming increasingly common. Today, Pine Bluff's violent crime rate is reported at roughly 1,650 incidents per 100,000 residents, placing it several times above the national average. These figures are not tied to a single unusual year, but reflect a pattern that has persisted over time. The city continues to grapple with the long-term effects of a shrinking tax base and the loss of its industrial core. With poverty levels hovering near 37% and public safety resources stretched thin, strain has become part of the everyday environment rather than a temporary phase. Some residents cope with dark humor, joking that police sirens now echo through the evening more often than the sounds of nature. Yet behind the jokes is a recognition that the challenges are serious and ongoing. There is an unspoken understanding among locals about which areas feel safer and which streets are best avoided after sunset. Standing by the Arkansas River at dusk, you can still appreciate the calm water and warm breeze. But when a distant siren cuts through the quiet, the contrast becomes clear, a place of natural beauty carrying visible marks of economic and social hardship. Number 5. Wilmington. Prosperity separated by invisible lines. Wilmington lies between Philadelphia and Baltimore, positioned along one of the most affluent economic corridors in the United States. On paper, its location alone suggests opportunity and steady growth. The city hosts major financial institutions, corporate headquarters, and some of the most business-friendly incorporation laws in the country. Vast amounts of capital pass through Wilmington every single day. Yet much of that money flows outward rather than settling into the surrounding neighborhoods. Only a few blocks away from sleek office towers and polished corporate buildings are communities that have faced decades of poverty, struggling schools, and recurring violent crime. The physical distance is short, but the economic divide feels far wider. Despite having a relatively small population, Wilmington's homicide rate has, at times, ranked among the highest per capita in the nation. The numbers stand in sharp contrast to the wealth visible in certain sections of the city. What makes Wilmington particularly striking is that the contrast is so immediate. You can stand beneath the shadow of a billion-dollar financial headquarters and be less than a mile from streets where violent crime rates have historically exceeded national averages by a significant margin. Here, prosperity does not seamlessly extend across neighborhoods. It often feels contained, concentrated behind office glass and corporate facades. If you exit I-95 for fuel or a quick stop, the skyline of financial logos might project stability. But appearances can be misleading. In Wilmington, the challenges are not hidden in remote areas. They exist alongside the city's economic engines. It is a place where tailored suits and street-level struggles occupy the same map, separated less by distance and more by barriers that are visible only if you know where to look. Number 4. Bessemer. Echoes of a fading promise. If you want to witness a stark reminder of the industrial American dream, look toward Bessemer. Once a thriving powerhouse of iron and steel production, the city did not simply experience decline. It was gradually emptied from the inside out. Today, towering rusted structures from a different era dominate the skyline, casting long shadows over nearby homes like relics of a forgotten age. Bessemer's challenges are often overshadowed in national discussions. While neighboring Birmingham tends to capture media attention, Bessemer quietly reports some of the highest per capita violent crime rates in the country. The figures translate to more than 33 violent incidents per 1,000 residents in certain years, roughly a 1 in 30 annual likelihood. Here, violence rarely makes dramatic headlines. Instead, it can feel like a persistent undertone of daily life, as steady and unyielding as corrosion spreading across abandoned steel frames. Located just southwest of Birmingham, Bessemer sits close enough to feel the gravity of a major metropolitan area, yet distant enough to shoulder many of the region's economic strains. Once proudly called the Marvel City, it was built on heavy industry and blue-collar labor. For generations, steel mills and industrial plants shaped routines, livelihoods, and identity. When that industrial foundation weakened and jobs disappeared, a full recovery never quite materialized. Poverty levels continue to hover near 30%, and with a reduced tax base, city infrastructure shows visible wear, cracked pavement, aging utilities, and inconsistent lighting in certain neighborhoods. What makes Bessemer particularly haunting is its post-industrial emptiness. It was designed to support a far larger population than it now holds. Those who remain navigate streets and spaces that feel oversized and underused, creating a sense of vacancy that lingers long after the factory whistles fell silent. Number 3. Oak Haven. Caught inside the machinery. Many people associate Memphis with music legends and famous barbecue. But just a few miles south of the bright downtown lights sits Oak Haven, a neighborhood shaped less by culture and more by cargo routes. This is not a charming district built around a walkable main street. It is an area wedged between one of the world's busiest cargo airports and a maze of interstate highways dominated by heavy truck traffic. In Oakhaven, risk does not wait for darkness. It exists beneath the constant glare of industrial floodlights that illuminate warehouses and loading zones around the clock. The environment feels engineered for freight, not for comfort. Statistically, Oakhaven has frequently ranked among the most challenged neighborhoods within Memphis, a city that already struggles with elevated violent crime rates. Here, the numbers do not rise gradually. They surge, particularly in categories like robbery, aggravated assault, and vehicle-related offenses. Poverty levels hover near 30%, and much of the infrastructure prioritizes the rapid movement of goods over neighborhood stability. The same roadways that funnel cargo trucks across state lines can quickly become settings for criminal activity. What makes Oakhaven especially unsettling is its in-between character. It feels less like a traditional community and more like an industrial grid, distribution centers, vacant lots overgrown with weeds, and residential pockets pressed against airport boundaries. The air often carries the scent of jet fuel and exhaust, and the sound of planes rarely fades completely. Global shipments move through this area at remarkable speed. Yet many of the people who live here face cycles of long-term economic hardship. Incidents such as robberies, carjackings, and assaults occur beneath the relentless roar of departing aircraft, giving the violence a stark, mechanical backdrop. If you exit near the airport for fuel, you may notice how quickly people come and go. Gas stations are heavily secured, and the atmosphere often feels hurried and guarded. The constant movement surrounding the neighborhood only reinforces the sense that it has been left behind. In Oakhaven, the danger feels intertwined with the logistics network itself. It is like standing inside the moving parts of a massive machine, one that never slows down. Keeping your car running and staying alert can feel less like caution and more like instinct. Here, the flow of cargo is swift, and the risks can escalate just as quickly. Number 2, Miami. An unexpected reality in the desert. Miami, Arizona, is far removed from the tropical imagery its name might inspire. There are no sandy beaches, no swaying palms, and no ocean breeze. Instead, this small town sits in the high desert of eastern Arizona, framed by steep hills and vast open-pit copper mines carved into the landscape. The community was built around mining, and its fortunes have long been tied to that single industry. When copper prices climb, the town finds stability. When the market drops, the strain becomes visible. Decades of extraction have left environmental scars, limited economic diversification, and a population that has gradually decreased over time. Though small in size, Miami carries complex challenges. Reports place the overall crime rate at approximately 56.5 incidents per 1,000 residents in a typical year. Combined with a poverty rate near 32%, the economic pressure adds weight to a town with few safety nets or alternative industries to rely on. This is not a place defined by dramatic scenes of violence. Instead, it feels disorienting. Local gas stations and storefronts do not necessarily project danger. They often feel isolated, quiet, and somewhat disconnected, serving a community still searching for its next chapter. Miami appears on this list not because of spectacle, but because of contrast. It represents the space between expectation and reality. A name that suggests coastal luxury stands in stark opposition to a mining town shaped by boom and bust cycles. It is a reminder that identity, branding, and optimism do not always withstand economic shifts. Number 1, Taos. Fragile systems behind a stunning backdrop. Taos has long been portrayed as a sanctuary. For decades, artists, writers, and spiritual seekers have arrived here, drawn by the striking desert light, sweeping landscapes, and the promise of a quieter, more intentional life. On the surface, Taos appears to be thriving. Art galleries bustle with visitors, property values remain high, and the town seems to have protected its cultural identity in ways many communities have not. Yet that polished image does not reflect the daily reality for everyone who lives there. Taos is not unraveling in dramatic fashion, but on a per capita basis, it ranks among the more violent small towns in the Southwest. Violent crime rates are reported at roughly twice the national average, while property crimes such as burglary and theft remain persistent concerns for residents. What places Taos at the top of this list is not spectacle, but structural strain. Lighting in certain areas can be inconsistent. Law enforcement coverage is sometimes fragmented across jurisdictions, and emergency response times may stretch longer than ideal due to the region's geography and distance between services. Beneath the postcard scenery lies a widening economic divide. Local wages often trail far behind rising housing costs, pushing many longtime residents to the margins. In surrounding areas, some households face limited infrastructure, inconsistent utilities, and scarce employment opportunities. Taos earns its position not because it is visibly chaotic, but because it highlights a deeper issue. Even communities celebrated for beauty and culture can struggle with systems that fail to serve all of their residents equally. When preserving an image becomes easier than addressing underlying imbalances, pressure builds quietly. Taos stands as a reminder that scenic views and high-end lifestyles do not automatically guarantee stability, and that even in the most picturesque settings, locking the door at night remains a routine act of caution. These towns are not exceptions. They are reflections. They reveal what can unfold when factories shut down, when institutions lose credibility, and when prosperity flows past a community without ever settling in. They represent another dimension of America, not the skyline of ambition and expansion, but the quieter landscape of overlooked neighborhoods and unmet expectations. So the next time you pass through a small, silent town on a long stretch of highway, keep this in mind. Silence does not always equal safety. Sometimes, it simply marks what has been left behind.